language school. We had 2 little ones. Tanya had just turned 2 and Andrew was just 4 months. We got to school late at night in the apartment they had told us, and we knocked on the door. Somebody was in our apartment and they said, "Oh, hi, come on in. Dana has the chicken pox, but our apartment's not ready, so they put us in yours." And so we started language school with chicken pox.
Federal police are, the word comes to mind is vicious. One of them walked up to me and put that sawed-off shotgun right in my face and said, "I'm gonna blow your head off." And, you know, how do you reply to that?
I was like, man, I been in jobs really hard in America, and I did all kind of jobs. I don't think go to school to learn Japanese would be harder than that. But once I started going, I realized that Japanese language is so hard, you know. Like seriously, the day that I speak Japanese, I'm gonna buy a shirt saying like I got superpowers. I can speak Japanese, and I'm gonna wear that shirt every day.
Learning language is a huge deal here. I have a tutor that comes once a week and we study together for a few hours, and then of course I have homework throughout the week. Just memorizing and writing out and translating and correcting and then memorizing again. I feel like it's a never-ending process.
I have pictures of my mom praying with me, kneeling beside my crib. I've known Jesus forever and ever.
Dorciane and I met in the lunchroom in 8th grade. I went home and I met her parents. Her mother afterwards said the only place you go with that guy is to church. So I had to go to church the following Sunday.
I grew up in a home with a mom who was a drug addict and my stepdad who was an alcoholic. You know, I just was pretty unhappy, pretty confused, I think, probably, often afraid.
I met a friend in my job and he was a Christian, and I told him that I was a Christian too, you know, but at that time I didn't really know the real meaning of Christian.
I want to be the kind of mother, kind of person that no matter what happens, my children know that God and Jesus is real. He's everything to me, and that's hopefully what my children know about me as well.
This man gets up and he starts talking and everybody's listening to him, and I really didn't follow what he was saying, but all of a sudden everybody at the table said, "You got to go up and get saved." Okay, I'll go and get saved. So I walked up to the front and this guy hands me a card and says, "Sign it." So I signed the card and I went back to the table. Everybody said, "Did you get saved?" I said, "I don't know, I signed some card, you know."
I moved in with my grandma when I was 11. My grandma knew something was up and my life was starting to even fall apart at a small age. And she invited me to go to the youth group, which I did not want to go to, but I went anyway to make them happy. And I went for about 6 months before I finally understood it. It just clicked in my head, the message I've been hearing, and I felt like I needed to give my life to God. My life did change at that time, and it was something that my mom noticed. It was something that my grandma noticed.
I heard the gospel many times since I was little, but not until that day, you know, that I really hearing, I really understood the meaning, you know, I really understood why Jesus died for me. My heart just broke, I remember it just broke, and I realized that like this is serious. I need to dedicate my life to the Lord. I had so much joy, so much peace, and I started doing things that I didn't before,
I started working at WIM because I felt called to missions. Actually, the very summer that I first received the call from the Lord, I had the opportunity to work at WIM, and my initial thought was, this isn't what I had in mind, but wow, this is a great opportunity. And it's also funny because at that time, I had a very romantic idea of what missions was. And to me, missionaries were like angels. After working at WIM a little while, I started to find out that missionaries are real people. And in a way, I was disappointed because I just didn't see that coming. And so it's really funny because I went through a period where I was kind of like, oh, this is, my ideas are shot down and this is different than I thought. But what happened was I realized through relationship with the missionaries and serving them and getting to know them, I began to hear amazing stories of what God was doing. And then it became even more powerful because I realized they are people just like me, and yet God's using them for these amazing things. No, they're not perfect. No, they're not up on a pedestal. They're real people, and they deal with distractions, they deal with trials, they deal with family issues, but they're still out there doing it.
When Andy and I met, and then he finally got to know the Lord and stuff, and we decided to get married.
We were called to be youth directors in a little Christian and Missionary Alliance church where her brother attended, and it was at that Alliance church they had a missions conference. And we just looked at each other and we said, this is it, we're going to serve the Lord. So we went forward and gave our lives for full-time missionary service. Missionaries are supposed to go to language school and learn a language, so quit our jobs and drove to Texas again, Edinburgh, Texas, and enrolled in a Spanish language school. Dorciane graduated #1 in the language school. I flunked. The minister there, that was a language teacher, said that perhaps I was one that just cannot learn a foreign language.
Y Padre Santo, que la gloria de Jesucristo sea manifestado en las caras de cada persona que está aquí, en el nombre de Cristo Jesús. Amén.
I went to college, Bible college, with the idea that I was going to be a missionary. But in my first Bible college class, they said, if God is calling you to leadership within the church, then you need to be sure that you're sure that God is calling you. I decided to lay down that desire of going on the field until God spoke to me and gave it back to me. I just laid it at His feet. And that was really hard for me to not have a plan of action. Later, I was on a Wednesday night worship service, and I was just, spending time in worship along with everyone else. And all of a sudden, God spoke to me. I am sending you. You will go. Pursue me. I didn't know what the next step was going to be. But it was a few months later when Dale and Kathy Pugh introduced me to Chris and Vonda from World Indigenous Missions. They were itinerating, and they invited me to go down to Mexico for a few weeks just to pray and see what my next step was.
As we were looking for agencies, we looked at several different agencies, and from the very get-go, we just felt there was a connection with WIM. There was a connection with the people in the office and what they were offering. And I think one of the things that was a great draw to us was the training program.
Just the fact that you're not just thrown out there in the mission field, that was very comforting to me. They're going to have you with someone else who's gone through these experiences that you're about to go through. What are some of the difficulties? What are some of the joys? And just walking through that with you, helping you find your way in that totally new culture, new language, not feeling like you're just out there alone.
The numbers don't lie. 19 out of 20 that we send to the field, that is all missions in general, are not going to make it to the end of their first term. It's tough out there. And what can we do to break that terrible syndrome of losing good people?
When I was training with the Briles for 2 years, I met with them every week and we discussed things that we were learning about things I'd noticed about the culture, questions that I had. Why do they do this? What does this mean? They helped guide me along that path, but also correct me when I was misunderstanding things or needed to approach relationships in a different manner. They taught me many different things about how to be successful in the culture where I was and how to really just pour out God's love and not only, relate to the culture, but also be myself.
After they've gone through a period of approximately 3 years, internship, apprenticeship, learning a true discipleship model, we're seeing more like 80 to 85% retention of people after their first term. Numbers are telling the truth.
Some weeks we have 5 people, some weeks we have 8 people, some weeks we have 1 people, some weeks we have no one.
I had people tear up my tracks in front of me and throw them on the ground, spit on the ground, and just walk away. We don't want that stuff here. It was hard. In fact, it was so hard that after about 18 months of that, I couldn't handle the rejection anymore.
Anthony, our youngest, was going into his junior year of high school. It was really hard for him to want to go to Mexico. And when we pulled away and left him, I did break.
It was raining and it was cold, and I think I had an issue of gout in my foot or something. It was swollen, and we were a short team, so I was working an 80-hour work week at least. I remember holding my umbrella, trudging along the street, and looking down at my foot and thinking, you're useless.
Member care for WIM is really pastoral care. We are concerned with the spiritual and emotional quality of our missionaries. Back in 1995, we read a book called Too Valuable to Lose, and it really gave us a heart for missionaries.
When we were on the field in the Philippines and in Thailand, we really didn't have any. And WIM was smaller and not as up to date with some things, so we had saw the real need for missionaries to have somebody that they could talk to, somebody that would just listen to their stories, that could help them sort through any struggles that they had emotionally or spiritually. And of course we do care for them. We care about their physical being too. That kind of all goes together. We've been doing member care for, 10, 15 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recently, Pastor Chris came to visit us.
At WIM, we try to get out and visit our field missionaries once every 18 months to 24 months. Currently, I'm in Kawasaki City. This visit to the Alvarado family is very special on many levels, but mostly because I've known Janine for 10 years. She was an intern trainee under my wife and I in Mexico for 2 years. And now God has her and her family over here in Japan. They're working in a church plant. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens in the future, and I couldn't be more proud of them. When I go visit a missionary family, I always try to make sure that we have opportunity to go out to a nice dinner at a restaurant or something, maybe do something they don't normally get to do. I know from firsthand experience, when you have small children on the field, you usually don't get to go out on a date. You don't have anybody to take care of your children. So it's very important to me to be able to help our younger families be able to have that opportunity to connect again.
We had such a great time. We got the chance, to take him to Japanese school, my school. I introduced him to one of the directors from the school. I say to my sensei, he's my chacho, my boss. And she was like, oh, and she started buying, Just to see that moment, a relationship between WIM and Japan. So I felt like, man, this is awesome. It was such a great, refreshment for us to have Pastor Chris here in Japan and giving us advice.
The business side of it is more of just observing, watching what they're doing, listening to their stories, some of their successes, some of their failures. I might make a suggestion as to something we tried in Mexico, but I'm not going to force them to do it because it's a different culture. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about encouraging people. It's just words, reading scripture together, praying together. So it's an all-encompassing visit. Sometimes it's only a day or two in an area. It just depends on travel schedule. But while I'm here in Japan, it's almost a week.
Yeah, it was such a great time.
And so when we talk about culture, usually we're not even aware of it until we run across someone of a different culture. Then we see the cultural differences and we realize, you know what, this person is different than I am. They think differently, they behave differently, they have a different perspective of life, they have a different perspective of how to handle problems, issues in life, and that's all having to do with culture.
Mexico is different. The very culture comes from a different place than our culture. The language is different. But more so, Mexico over the centuries has blended with the indigenous cultures in a way that we have not. We are working with the people that are as far removed from what is typically known as Mexican culture as you can be, because they have lived in isolation for so long. The western part of the state of Guerrero is the last of the Badlands as far as the Mexicans are concerned. The people are real. They won't know what to make of you. Why are these outsiders here? Are they buyers for drugs? Are they people looking to start up a new business in that area? But as they get to know you, you'll find some of the most beautiful, warm, fun people on God's earth.
So you look forward to going down there?
Oh, of course we look forward to going down there. These are who we're sent to. We're sent ones. That's what a missionary is. And this is what we've been called to do. We've given our lives to it. We're in our 45th year. And it's a blast.
Our mission is to disciple the nations to reach the world. So discipleship is a strong core value for us, to go and make disciples of other men and women who can then raise up other disciples from among their people group.
In Puerto Rico, I found Pastor Lalo, who's doing a strong discipleship ministry, leading his church.
Entonces conocí a Andrés y ensamblamos.
When I met Brother Andrew, we began to see that we had the same spirit. We didn't know anything about each other, but from that moment we were united by God.
A sembrar tu preciosa semilla. Y nosotros como colaboradores.
He began to say, "How can I help you?" He had just come for one visit with friends and family, but since then God is using him for our growth, for the extension of the gospel in this part of the Sierra.
Andrés, yo lo considero un enviado de Dios.
I think of Andy as someone sent by God. someone that just suddenly showed up in the time of need. He asked me, "Lalo, how can I help you? If I can do something for you, I want to help your ministry." And so that's when he began to collaborate with me. I had a group of leaders that had just gone through a discipleship program, and they were doing the work, but they still lacked preparation and they needed more. Right then, Andy gave us an opportunity to enroll in a system of training, and we began the project of preparing leaders with this Bible school.
The school opened with 26 students, and 19 of them completed their first year that spring. 17 of them now finished the second year of the 3-year licenciado program.
Young people like my age haven't heard yet about Jesus, so like it's a really a privilege, to me, like to be around people and just bring this great news,
There are some sacrifices that you have to make as a missionary as far as being close to your family and being limited in the time that you can spend together, time that grandparents get to spend with their grandkids. It's not only a sacrifice on our side, but it's a sacrifice, on our family side as well. Sometimes if you're not seeing the fruit that you want to see, that you're expecting to see, it can be tempting to think, is this worth it? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? When I come across those times, there's one scene in my head that I always go back to. I've been translating my testimony with my tutor, and she's not a believer, she's a Buddhist, and it was kind of a last minute thing. We weren't planning on doing that day, but I wrote out my testimony real quick, and I just put a simple gospel explanation because she wouldn't understand the testimony without the message. Finally, I was able to explain why Jesus had to die, why it was, and why he did it for love. And at that moment, she very animatedly just sat up and she hit her forehead like this, and she fell back against my couch. She said, I finally understand why Jesus had to die. And I was sitting there like, whoa, this is why I came to Japan. This is why, because people don't understand the gospel here. They've maybe seen pictures of Jesus, and they might see pictures of crosses, but they don't know. And it's like, that's why I'm here.
WIM is a support in a lot of ways that people don't even realize they need. And that's what's so funny about it, because once people have been on the field, once people have been missionaries for a while, I think they start to realize even more, oh, that's why I needed help.
I believe not having a mission organization, or a care team behind, things will be extremely difficult.
Going out on your own, people have done it, and that's great, and if God has called you to that, that's what's great. But if you go out on your own when you could have been with a team, I think that you're cutting out a lot of the fruit that you could have had together. It's not about doing it all on our own, but it's about advancing the kingdom of God, and together as a team, I think we can accomplish much more than on our own.
The best way I've found to handle the question of, do we need a mission agency? I would point out what WIM does, but I would also be asking, who's going to do that for you? I'd point out the training program. What are you going to do when you have problems on the field? Who are you going to go to?
I would point out the problems of the whole support structure. You know, how are you going to get your money? Who's going to handle that for you? Someone has to do it. You know, the way our nation is set up, we have legal responsibilities to the government, as well as legal responsibility to the government where they're going to be going. So who's going to handle those things?
I think that's one of the things that WIM does well, is just save time for the missionaries, because the whole point is that they're doing ministry, and that's why we do that, because we're trying to help them maximize the ministry opportunities so that they're not thinking about administrative things and distracted by just details.
If you ask enough questions along those lines, I think they begin to get the picture of, hey, this isn't quite as easy as I thought it was.
God can use any person, no matter whether they think they're a church planter or not. And because we really, we didn't see ourselves that way at all at first. But looking back, it's like God really did that. We're just normal people that God used.
The harvest is ripe. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world and see that the harvest is ripe in many places. Every place I go, there's need. But as Jesus said, the workers are few. And we're instructed to pray to the Lord of the harvest for more workers to go into his field. So I would like people to pray for the Lord of the harvest to send more workers. And we are ready to receive them. We're ready to train them. We're ready to love them. We're ready to walk side by side with them each and every step of the way. Think of it, half the world's population, 3.5 billion people are unevangelized. Many of those have never even heard the name of Jesus one time. There is a lot of work to do. And I think together we can make a difference in this world.